Hello, in this video I'm going to be introducing you to the idea of complex numbers. Okay, so I'll put timestamps below so you can skip through to the part of the video that you want to see, but the way I'm going to introduce them is through this question here that says we have to solve x squared minus 2x plus 5 equals 0 using the quadratic formula. Okay, so let's make a note of the quadratic formula. It's x equals negative b plus minus root b squared minus 4ac, and that is all going to be divided by 2a. So let's substitute our values of a, b and c into this quadratic formula to find the solution x. So we're going to get 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 minus 20, all divided by 2a, so just 2. And simplifying this, we get x is equal to 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 16, all divided by 2. Okay, and so in the past, if you were solving a quadratic and you got this negative square root, you would probably say, okay, there are no solutions, okay, there are no roots to this equation, so clearly the quadratic is going to probably look something like this. Okay, this is pretty bad drawing, but it's not going to even touch my x-axis, so there are no solutions. And so to help us solve an equation like this still, we have to introduce what's called the imaginary unit. And this is I, and it's defined to be equal to the square root of negative 1, okay? And so this is key, okay, in complex numbers, and also just to solve stuff like this. And so this unit I, this imaginary unit it's called, this is still a number and it behaves the exact same. So we could add I and I together, so I plus I, and we just get 2I. We could square it, so we could say I squared, and that would just be equal to the square root of negative 1 squared, and so we get negative 1, okay? So there are lots of things that we can do with it, and it just behaves the exact same way as any other number. So let's now use this to help us find the square root of negative 16. So let's write it over here. We've got the square root of negative 16. Well, that is equal to the square root of 16 multiplied by negative 1. And then using our surd rules, we can split this up into two square roots multiplied together. So that's going to be equal to the square root of 16 multiplied by the square root of negative 1. And the square root of 16 is just going to be equal to 4. And the square root of negative 1, well, we just defined that. That's equal to the imaginary unit I. And so the square root of negative 16 is just equal to 4i. So let us write that in. So we've got x is equal to 2 plus or minus 4i, all divided by 2. Okay, and so we get the solutions of x that are going to be equal to, x is going to be equal to 1 plus 2i, or x is going to be equal to 1 minus 2i. Okay, and so we've now found solutions to this quadratic equation that we didn't previously know. And so this is what the imaginary unit is. This is where we can use it to help us solve problems. But what is a complex number? Well, complex numbers usually are written or denoted with the letter z, okay? And they take the form of a plus bi, where a and b are just real numbers, so they're just any number you can think of, really. And so they have a real part, so in this case a, and they have an imaginary part, which is b in this case, okay? So a complex number consists of a real and an imaginary part. And we can sometimes use this notation, so RE, okay, and that is the real part. So if we're talking about the real part of a plus bi, then that would just be whatever a is. And then we could talk about the imaginary part of a plus bi, and this is whatever the coefficient of I is. So let's take a look at some imaginary numbers. We could have z1, and that could be, say, 3 plus 2i. Or we could have, say, z2, and that could be equal to negative 4 minus 5i. Okay, and these are complex numbers because we have a real and an imaginary component. So let's see how we can add and subtract these complex numbers. Okay, so we've got z1 being 3 plus 4i, and z2 being 7 plus 6i. So say we want to find z1 plus z2. Well, this is really easy, okay? All we have to do, in fact, let's write it out. So we've got 3 plus 4i, and then we're adding on to that 7 plus 6i. And all we need to do when we add complex numbers together is add the real components and then add the imaginary ones. So I'm going to do 3 plus 7, so I get 10. And then I'm going to do 4i plus 6i, or 4 plus 6. And so I'm going to get plus 10i, and that's it. And subtraction works the same way. So let's work out z1 subtract z2. And so we're going to get 3 plus 4i subtract, let's put it in brackets, subtract 7 plus 6i. And so we're going to subtract the real parts. So I'm going to do 3 subtract 7. So I'm going to get negative 4. And then I'm going to subtract the imaginary parts. So we get 4 subtract 6, I. So we're going to get negative 2i. And that's pretty much it for this video. So this was just an introduction to complex numbers. Hopefully it was useful. If it was, subscribe, like the video and share it, and thank you for watching.